Welcome to the neighborhood.
Kind neighbors with helping hands are the foundation of every good community.
He had lived in this neighborhood the longest.
You don't gotta do that. Figure your lawn should look as good as mine.
He felt responsible for keeping the neighborhood the way it's been.
Hey, get out!
But when new arrivals shake up bedrock traditions,
Are you selling drugs?
Mind your own business.
the unwelcome change ignites a war.
Get away from her!
Don't mess with my son, old man.
You don't have the right to tell other people how they're gonna live.
This is my neighborhood!
You just did not expect
Sick of this guy.
what happened next.
You think you're good at this, don't you? You're lying.
A merciless fight for control erupts into the most deadly conflict in Fear Thy Neighbor history.
Help! Help! Everything is burning!
Hey! Ow! What are you doing?
I'm not moving anywhere. Why don't you leave? As old man, as pathetic as you!
In Akron, Ohio, Sherbondi Hill.
Sure, Bondi Hill is a typical middle-class Akron neighborhood. It has a mix of different types of families, old, young, large, and small.
It is an older neighborhood where children play and older adults retire to.
Stanley Ford has called Sherbondi Hill home for decades.
Stanley Ford is definitely one of the people who had lived in this neighborhood the longest. He lived first at his mom's house, and then after she passed, he ended up living with his family in the house next door.
Thanks, baby.
Stanley, a semi-retired letter carrier, is deeply devoted to both his community and his family. Especially his wife, Sunita, a busy mom and full-time school teacher.
I love you.
Drive safe.
He actually would see his wife off to work every morning, would actually walk out, escort her to the vehicle, and also make sure she got off safely.
Stanley's morning routine also includes going next door to check on his childhood home he inherited years ago.
As a storage and kind of a working area. And he took care of the children as well. They would actually follow behind him while he mowed his yard with their own toy mower.
Are you gonna charge me for helping cut the grass?
No. Yeah.
So he was well protective and a decent father in terms of his daughters.
Luckily for his two young girls, Stanley is a devoted stay-at-home dad. But his favorite pastime is helping his neighbors.
With Stanley being in the neighborhood the longest, I would think he felt responsible for keeping the neighborhood the way it's been.
You don't gotta do that, Stan. Hey, Chester. The Lord said you should be rich in good deeds. I figure your lawn should look as good as mine.
Stanley Ford presented himself as being a very strict religious type person who took pride in his neighborhood.
Well, I belong in the back too. Well, maybe when I'm finished, I'll get to it.
So he kind of found himself as the mayor. He loved Sherbondi Hill and really took it.
Another of Sherbondi Hill's most well-known residents is Lindell Lewis, also a devout Christian who lives across the street from Stanley.
Lindell Lewis had lived in this neighborhood for quite some time, but not as long as Stanley Ford.
Beautiful day, though.
Yeah, it's nice.
Lindell's girlfriend is Gloria Hart, also known as Jeannie.
I can definitely tell you my dad loved Gloria, so she was actually a nice lady. Funny, kind.
Beautiful day.
Yeah, it's nice.
Mr. Ford and Mr. Lewis had frequented church on a regular basis.
Need a lift?
No, we're gonna walk.
We could use the exercise. With your hip? Get over here, you old fool.
Stanley Ford was pretty friendly with them, and if he liked you, he seemed to be the type of person who would look out for you, who would do things for you.
Stanley,
He was there for them. He was a good neighbor to them.
Thank you, brother. Can't keep the pastor waiting.
Lindell also was retired and he had some health issues, and so he wasn't able to get around that well because of that.
Lindell is a former master bricklayer, while Jeannie retired after a career. Stanley both love to give back to their community.
They both like to have people over and be just a great neighbor. Lindell would just help people out as much as he could, because if he was in a similar situation, he would want people to help him.
Everybody good?
But nothing can help neighbors who turn on each other.
You be careful, old man. What is your problem, brother? It's over. You're going to hell.
This had a huge impact because of how many people were involved, and also who would have thought anything like this would have happened.
One day, Lindell takes his community spirit a step further. The Good Samaritan offers a troubled soul a roof over his head.
Thanks for the help, man. I really appreciate it, man.
My dad was so kind-hearted. He would let you stay if you needed somewhere to stay. That's just the type of person he was.
Stan, my friend, Thomas Hughley.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man.
Thomas Hughley was a friend of Lindell Lewis's. They had gone to high school together, and so they had a long history in the past.
You can be staying in my basement with me for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
Help people, and he seemed to like people who maybe had a struggle. He wanted to reform them.
Lindell would often rent out the basement to people who maybe had drug addiction problems or had been homeless at some point. Hughley was the latest person to rent out that space.
I'm gonna have a party tonight. You're welcome to come.
Stanley declines the invitation.
Sorry, I'm not into that.
All right, brother, let's go.
Right this way. Let me show you where you be staying. Grab your stuff.
Stanley is concerned Thomas Hughley will shake up his peaceful street. And that night, his fears are confirmed.
Lindell's house was described by neighbors as being wild. A lot of that has to do with the company that he kept. They had some parties on the porch.
My dad was a people person. You know, my dad would barbecue and have friends over. I don't think Stanley liked it.
The company he kept definitely were doing things that definitely Stanley didn't approve.
According to Stanley, Lindell's guests are engaging in sinful behavior.
Those people are on drugs.
Stanley Ford was a man of God. He loved to go to church. He wants other people to follow suit. When you see someone doing something you don't like, especially for Stanley, he wants them to stop. He doesn't want anything disrupting his perfect neighborhood.
Talk to Lindell in the morning.
You bet I will.
Hey, Stan.
Your friend Thomas has got to go. I got kids, man.
Yeah, I got kids too.
They're adults. I got young girls. They can't be around drugs.
Provides a useful service.
Mr. Hughley would cut grass. That was his occupation. He actually was called the grass man by several individuals and witnesses that we spoke with. He took care of multiple yards, including Chester Williams.
Why don't you give the man a break until he sorts himself out?
Stanley isn't convinced by Thomas Hughley's good deeds. He looks into his past and immediately shares his findings with friend and neighbor, Chester Williams.
Hey, he's a burglar.
Stanley Ford made an accusation against Thomas Hughley.
He cuts your grass so he can check out your property.
Because Thomas Hughley was busy in the neighborhood. He was helping jobs.
The guy's gotta go. I think you're being a bit paranoid. Okay. Have it your way.
Late that night, Stanley's words seem prophetic.
Mr. Chester Williams' vehicle, that was broken into.
You okay? Yeah. He said there's a rash of break-ins around here. Nothing they can do.
Police reports were made, Subsequently, no identification was made or arrest was made as a result.
I'm just gonna put some security cameras. That's it? Cameras? That's how you catch a thief.
Chester decided to install these cameras because he felt like something bad could happen. He didn't know exactly what, so he installed the cameras just so they could have some type of protection.
Neighbors hope the break-in was a lone incident. But Stanley expects the worst. And the worst happens.
Hey, baby.
What's going on?
Okay. Stay with them. I'll be right back. Stay with them.
Stanley Ford thought that Tom Hughley tried to break into his home.
Stanley, get back inside.
But Stanley's not about to let this go. The next day, he confronts Thomas.
Hey, you! You think I don't know what you did? You broke into my house.
No, I didn't. That's a lie.
There was some accusations going back and forth between Thomas Hughley and Stanley Ford.
Get out of my face.
And it intensified.
There was actually a physical fight between Mr. Ford and Mr. Hughley.
Whoa, Stan, cool it.
The brawl captures the attention of Chester Williams and Serena Jones.
I can see it was a lot of testosterone going on. You knew it was going to come to a head at some time.
I'm warning you.
But not the way it happened.
Stay away from my family!
Stanley Ford didn't approve at all of Thomas Hughley. He blamed Thomas Hughley for an attempted break-in at his home.
Police were called as a result, and/or some neighbors diffused the fight as well.
I'm telling you, the guy is crazy. He could have broke my jaw over nothing.
He broke a window to get into my house.
You have no proof.
I know. Trust me. He does it to pay for his drugs.
Tom Hughley personified what Stanley thought was wrong with Lindell Lewis and how his house was run.
To prevent the situation from escalating further, Jeannie comes up with a solution.
Okay.
Listen, why don't you let me pay for your broken window? Deal?
Okay.
Lindell was definitely trying to make amends. He was trying to say, hey, this is our neighborhood. We don't need to be fighting. Here's some money for this broken window.
Why don't you come inside and we'll have a drink and sort this out?
You know I don't drink. Nor thieves, nor drunkards will inherit the kingdom of God.
Even though it didn't seem to soothe the tension between the two.
Stanley is left shaken and worried about what might happen next in his beloved neighborhood.
Mr. Ford was definitely more paranoid about what was going on.
Concerned he'll be a victim of the rising crime, Stanley installs an alarm system at all times.
He and his wife were the only key holders that managed and monitored that location.
His Bunday Hill neighborhood was no longer the traditional type neighborhood that he grew to love, and he felt that it was changing for the worse.
You go, baby girl. Look at you.
Mostly, Stanley fears for his daughters.
Hey, excuse me. Can I use your cell phone?
I don't have one.
He actually thought that prostitutes were coming out of Lindell's house. He said a prostitute, or who he thought was a prostitute, approached him and asked for sex.
Well, can I use your house phone? I know where you live. I'll make it worth your while.
Just stay away from us.
Mr. Ford was very protective of his family, as anyone would be, so this activity was not acceptable.
That trash has got to go.
What trash?
Just take her inside.
He thought he ran the neighborhood.
She's a prostitute.
No, she's not.
He didn't want anything out of the ordinary being done in his neighborhood.
She is Lindell. You can't bring trash onto my street. Get rid of them.
But it's not your neighborhood. You just live here. It's everybody's neighborhood.
Candy's not trash. She's...
Who's Ronald? What's he doing here?
Ronald was one of those transient individuals that would visit parties, drinking, and so forth. Subsequently, he became a tenant. He lived in the basement with Mr. Hughley.
I'm sick of your riffraff.
As it turns out, Stanley is not alone in his concerns. Neighbor Bev Ewing is also unnerved by Lindell's rowdy crowd.
Some neighbors would just avoid the house just to get away from all of it. They didn't take it to the extreme of Stanley, but they would just leave it alone and just not go towards that direction.
Let me help you with this.
You're an angel.
It's the highest compliment a neighbor could give Stanley.
I think God put me on this street for a reason.
Stanley says, I feel like I'm an angel of the neighborhood. I feel like God sent me here to look over the neighborhood. You really love your neighborhood when you say something like that.
I'm not gonna let the hooligans take over our street.
What are you gonna do then?
I don't know yet.
Neighbors Stanley and Lindell couldn't be more at odds.
Mr. Ford had stated to other neighbors that Mr. Lee's residence, and if not, then he would take care of it.
And Lindell Lewis, he didn't like the fact that Stanley Ford would make judgment upon him and his activities in his own home.
No, I'm happy to have you all here. I need you to maybe keep it off the front porch a bit.
Nevertheless, to appease Stanley and other residents, Lindell offers a new idea.
I just know that people would be outside. Sometimes they would sleep on the porch.
This is for y'all.
This is for us?
Yeah. Any of your friends want to crash? Hang out in there?
That's thoughtful of you, man. That's nice.
It may be a thoughtful offer, but Lindell's kind gesture is Stanley's worst nightmare.
Mr. Ford was very watchful, almost to an obsessive point, obviously. He actually stayed up late nights to observe activity.
In Stanley's eyes, Lindell's van is a drug den.
Mr. Ford was definitely not receptive of this type of assistance being offered to the transient parties, or the drug people, as he called them.
I think he would see it as kind of unsightly, just to have random people in the neighborhood sleeping in a car.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's what a house is for, is to...
Finally, in the early morning hours, all is quiet.
So Mr. Ford was protective, but offended in the same context. All parties in the neighborhood were well aware of Mr. Ford and the potential for things to escalate.
When daylight comes, Lindell finds his home is under attack.
Because of the buildup of intensity of the arguments between the two neighbors, immediately the suspicion was pointed toward Stanley Ford as being the person who committed that incident.
You did this! Me?
For Stanley, the guardian of the neighborhood, Lindell's accusation is outrageous and offensive.
No one wants to be accused of anything. Of course, he probably pointed fingers at other people because there were so many people who he did not care for coming in and out of Lindell Lewis's house.
How do you know it wasn't your drug dealer friends who didn't get paid?
Basically, it was a rumor going around the neighborhood that somebody smashed Lindell's windows out because somebody at Lindell's house owed somebody some money.
That's a lie. You know what? I think it's time you...
Very high point at that time.
You be careful, old man.
And finally just got to a breaking point.
That's right.
There's tension that's building.
Enough's enough. Sorry. Sick of this guy.
But no one would have known the magnitude of what was to occur.
Sick of you.
He ain't with you. Come on.
In the wake of the attack on Lindell Lewis's van, someone decides to teach Stanley a lesson.
My car! I know who did this. Let me deal with this.
Stanley Ford thought that Tom Hughley was responsible for damage to his wife's vehicle.
You think I don't know who did this? Get out here! Whoa! What are you doing? Back up, man! Back off! I'm done with this. I'm done with all of you. It's over. You hear me? It's over.
Serena Jones witnesses the altercation and fears the tension could lead to violence.
Just send the police.
It becomes tense to the point that people can no longer control themselves. Law enforcement needs to be brought in at that time to separate.
I want to charge this man with harassment.
The time Hughley a lot when he came back and forth through the neighborhood.
I live beside a crack den on wheels. That's harassment. You see how he provokes us? This is my neighborhood. It's time for you to go.
What I thought about Stanley making that statement that this is my neighborhood meant that he owned it. To me, it's like a mama bear. Mama bear is gonna do anything to protect what's rightfully hers.
You're an ungodly sinner. You're going to hell. He's crazy.
Stanley is enraged that Lindell and Thomas Hughley have turned law enforcement's focus onto him.
That guy right there.
Stanley Ford didn't want the attention of the police department or his neighbors looking at him in a different light.
Lindell and his guests are fed up with Stanley's tyrannical behavior.
Lindell and his buddies just started to kind of ignore Stanley. They just went ahead and did what they wanted to do and tried not to pay him any mind.
And within a matter of hours, another wild party erupts at Lindell's house.
Let the good times roll.
Lindell was trying to keep to himself and trying to keep the peace in the neighborhood, but he was not backing down from Stanley Ford at all either.
Ooh-wee. Hey, baby girl. You want to come party with us?
With people, a person that's normally loud would be extra loud, and a person of what I think is called a crap starter would start crap even more.
Come on. Hey, I know you would have some fun. Girl, hey, come on and party with us.
Mr. Ford would stand there and watch them or have maybe an aggressive stance or aggressive nature to make them uncomfortable, just to try to intimidate them to stop and or leave.
What are you doing, bro? Find your bed.
You a tough guy, Stan.
You want to come party in the van, Stan? I'll make it worth your while.
At that point in time, the conflict between the two neighbors was escalating to the point where you didn't know what to expect would happen next.
He's like nothing better to do but to stand there.
Before long, there's another incident in the neighborhood, but this time it's much more serious.
Days after they all get into this argument, Lindell's vehicle goes up in flames.
The van is a write-off.
There wasn't any proof that the suspicion was that Stanley Ford was responsible for that van fire.
Yet fire vehicle burned.
Well, we have a theory on why that van caught on fire. Because it was being used as basically a tent to smoke in, and people would go to sleep in it.
Still, Lindell and Jeannie are certain they know who torched it.
You did it!
We know you did this.
You don't know nothing. I slept through the whole thing.
Mr. Lewis felt, I need to do something to protect myself.
Lindell decides to set up surveillance of his own and buys 4 security cameras.
Hey, yeah, a big favor.
He then contacts a friend of his who he knows installs security cameras.
I need it done right away. Think you can help me out?
Mr. Lewis was adamant about these cameras must be installed before I have surgery for his hip.
All right, thank you.
And they must be directed and pointed at Mr. Ford's residence.
But the watchman doesn't want to be watched.
Hey, you can't put that up there.
Why don't you just mind your own business, man?
And it becomes some words we always did. A little bit of an argument breaks out.
You think that's going to stop people from setting fires?
God's name, what is your problem, brother?
2 Peter 2:6. An angel was summoned from the heavens to rain fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah.
Stanley was trying to scare him into doing what he wanted him to do. He did not like my dad's cameras.
Burning away the wickedness of the ungodly.
Intimidation, of course. He was trying to scare him. This is what's going to happen to you if you don't listen.
Whatever.
Think about it.
Mr. Lewis was very worried about the failed relationship that he and Mr. Ford now had. Mr. Lewis told a neighbor, this is a guy that is a problem, and I'm not sure what he's capable of.
As the feud reaches a boiling point, Lindell undergoes a hip replacement operation.
And he was convalescing at home, and he needed help at home, and his friend Gloria Hart at the time, she was there to help him.
But Stanley shows no empathy for his recovering neighbor.
Mr. Ford was aware of Mr. Lewis having difficulty moving to and from.
Stanley is still fuming about Lindell's cameras. He wants them taken down, one way or another. While Lindell's condition makes him feel particularly vulnerable.
Mr. Lewis felt that being incapacitated by surgery would have been the opportune time for Mr. Ford to try or attempt something.
I got this.
Lindell had a walker. Even going upstairs in his inside of his home, he would have to sort of scoot his way all the way upstairs.
The day that he called me, it was on a Sunday. He was like, if anything ever happened to me, look at the neighbor across the street.
With Lindell's movement now limited, he's stuck on the second floor at night.
To your help.
He can't keep an eye on the party that rages on his front porch.
Stanley went into hyper mode. He saw the neighborhood slipping through his control. So he wanted to take that control back really bad. And I think that's when his mindset really started to unravel at that point.
To your help.
Long after midnight, the party, but the night has only just begun.
So Thomas Hughley looks out of a window in the basement where he's staying and realizes that there are flames and that the house is on fire.
Here. It's fire.
No one predicted that this feud would have ended like this.
Get up out of here. Go, go, go. Right behind you.
Lindell Lewis's house is on fire, and the blaze is accelerating furiously.
Basically, it's a gigantic boom. So happened to run towards the house, and you could see the whole front. It was in flames. I've never ever been this close to a fire before, and it was hot. Yeah, I mean, it was really, really hot.
Lindell!
Instead of escaping, Jeannie stays behind to help Lindell.
I told you to get out.
Not without you!
The couple are just on the front and side of the house. They try to escape out the back.
Chloe, please help us. We gotta get him out. Lindell, you gotta jump.
Tommy saying, you gotta hurry up and jump.
I can't.
But for him just having surgery, there was no chance he was gonna find a way out.
Gloria could have easily left my dad, but she didn't. She was trying to make sure they both got out at the same time.
Someone help! Hurry! Hurry!
Hughley, obviously, since he's living there, he knows there's ladders behind here. Unfortunately, they're chained up.
It's locked! You gotta jump! I can't do it! I'm not strong enough!
And I heard Lindell saying, I can't get myself out the window. And then Lindell's head disappeared.
Lindell! Lindell!
And all you seen was black smoke.
Lindell! No!
It must feel so helpless to know that your friends are in trouble and you can't do anything. I mean, you have to feel so helpless and very afraid for those two upstairs trapped in that bathroom.
At that time, the fire was roaring. I'm talking about it was bad. And then it was another boom. Fire trucks that rolled up.
Area folks, the highest part of the house fire.
I got the knock on the door. Morning, it was my mom telling me we had to go now. And then that's when she told me there was a fire.
Command all companies, meet us in the front yard, please. All companies, front yard.
That morning, fire companies were actively still in suppression activities, still trying to put the fire out.
When the smoke clears, the bodies of Lindell Lewis and Gloria Jeannie Hart are found in the upstairs bathroom. It appears they succumbed to smoke inhalation.
The families were devastated. Here are two people in the latter years of their life enjoying each other's company, and they're involved in a fatal house fire, ending their lives.
As investigators comb through the scene, K-9 unit makes a major discovery.
Considering the burn patterns of how the fire was set and the location where the burns were used,
we found during our investigation that this fire had been intentionally set. It was an aggravated arson.
Please help us!
Authorities are quick to interview the only survivor.
Did you see anything?
No, didn't see anything.
Mr. Hughley was a person of interest. He was very confused and kind of wandering around, but we were able to obtain an initial statement from Mr. Hughley.
Any ideas on how this could have happened?
Stanley Ford. He lives there. I'm telling you, he did this.
Basically, it was a lot of people out there, and it was just real funny that the one person that's right across the street isn't out.
In the morning, we were actually standing in Stanley Ford's yard. We're looking at, the house, the rubbish, the burnt up. He came out and yelled at us, telling us to get off his grass. People in the neighborhood is like, do you see this fire? He didn't care at all.
Detectives grill Stanley on his movements the night before.
You didn't see anything?
No, I was in bed.
Everybody else came outside to see what was going on.
Mr. Ford was very standoffish about why they were talking with him.
Just don't like being interrogated.
He made clear that he was not the person who set this fire. He claimed it was not him. He claimed that the activities going on in Lindell Lewis's home was something that maybe God didn't want to happen, and that was the way God took care of things.
But investigators don't believe in fate. They work diligently to gather all possible evidence, including video from Lindell Lewis and Chester Williams security cameras. What they recover is shocking.
The cameras were able to capture the individual attempting to set fire to the residence.
The footage shows a hooded figure approaching Lindell's house, lighting it on fire. And running away. Moments later, what looks like the same figure approaches Stanley's house.
Most people, including myself, thought it could be Stanley.
But as investigators learn more about her, including Lindell's ex-wife, Francine.
So let me get this straight. You had a life insurance policy on Lindell and he didn't know about it?
I didn't do it, okay? I did not do this.
Well, of course, when an ex-spouse dies and it's something where it's a murder, who do you look at first? You look at the spouse. If you get a payout with your ex-husband being gone, the police are definitely going to look at you to see what motive you had and if you did this.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph?
What? No.
They wanted me to take a lie detector test? No. No. And it made me feel bad. It made me feel bad that they would think that I would do something to him. To Lindell. I would never do anything to Lindell.
I didn't do it.
Well, when you get defensive like that and someone asks you a question, you say, hey, it wasn't me. You're like, so why are you getting so defensive right now? If you're not a suspect, you wouldn't have to tell us that you're not a suspect. So that was definitely a red flag for them.
And so there was some thought that perhaps Ronald might have owed somebody drug money or something like that. And so that the fire could have been targeted to him rather than to Lindell and Jeannie.
Ronald Garrett was interviewed by detectives, and he was very uncooperative with detectives, so he was always a person of interest and was never ruled out, actually.
The second suspect, a man named McLemore, was one of Lindell's many house guests with a troubled past.
So McLemore is the friend of Lindell's who, prior to the fatal fire, had gotten mad at Lindell.
Lindell took care of McLemore for years.
Hey, man.
The relationship took a dark turn.
I know I gave you that money for safekeeping, but yeah, I'm gonna need that back.
Can't do. Go sleep it off.
Police thought that McLemore set his on fire. The police wonder if that feud could have been continuing.
Damn.
And that might have fueled him to set the house on fire.
The arson investigation loses momentum. Despite the video evidence, investigators aren't able to identify the killer.
Lindell definitely hung out with people that you could categorize as unsavory, or some people who may have a criminal history, and so there was a lot of people they could have pinned this fire on.
I think, Stanley Ford is one of their prime suspects, but they feel like they don't have enough information, enough evidence, enough proof to actually charge him with setting this fire.
Meanwhile, some neighbors wonder what's being said behind closed doors, inside Stanley's home.
Baby, did you do it?
Of course not.
The fire has rocked the community, but no one knows it's just the beginning.
Good night, sweetheart.
The neighborhood itself was terrified.
Somebody please help us!
A fire had occurred in their neighborhood, and no one had been held responsible for the deaths of Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart.
Funeral services are held, and the families of Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart grieve together.
Well, definitely the first couple of weeks were very, very rough. I still didn't believe it. I still didn't believe he was gone.
Soon the remains of the house will be torn down, leaving an empty lot.
Now, in the house there, he's gone. The whole area looks different. The whole street looks different. I don't even go past there anymore. It brings up bad memories. You keep hoping and keep hoping and hoping they'll find out who done it.
Yeah, it was quiet. For a while, people didn't come outside.
How are you?
When neighbors do talk, there's tension in the air.
I hate to say it, but everybody was suspect at that point. You're just kind of looking over your shoulder.
Meanwhile, Stanley Ford increases his surveillance of the neighborhood.
Hey, Bev.
Hey, Stan.
Bev Ewing is Stanley's longtime neighbor.
How's Carl? Still away on business?
Yeah, it's me and the girls.
I'll keep an eye out on things.
Mr. Ford was a watchman. Of course, that would instill some measure of comfort for the neighbors, for certain neighbors anyway.
Call me if you need anything.
The truth is, the people residing next door make Bev nervous. Anthony Sams and his son Devontae have recently moved onto the street, and their arrival has left Bev feeling uneasy.
And she found it comforting. She thought it was good to have someone looking out for her, especially when her husband wasn't able to do it probably at that moment.
But right now, Stanley's focus is on buying a third house just down the street. It's an underpriced fixer-upper.
Stanley wanted control over that neighborhood. And what's the best way to do that besides buying up the houses? So he thought if he could buy enough houses, he could make them his own, and he wouldn't have to worry about
when his plan fails.
I can understand Stanley being upset that he didn't get it. We all get upset when you want something and someone else gets it. So he created this narrative.
The rundown house got sold.
Where the longtime neighbors, they were all like the good ones.
Now some deadbeat's gonna move in. They'll probably turn it into a crack house.
And then he had created this other narrative where a lot of the newer neighbors were bad people.
That's not very neighborly of you. Give them a chance.
It turns out the new owners are a rather large clan.
Careful, it's heavy.
Mom, I'm stronger than you.
There are 8 members of the Huggins-Boggs family.
So Angela Boggs and Dennis Huggins had a very blended family. Angela came in with 2 kids, and then they ended up having 4 of their own. Their youngest one was 16 months old, and their oldest was around 17.
Brittany is the eldest child.
Well, Jared, he is the one who made me a big sister at 3. Me and him were close. Then my little sister Deja came along. She was sassy.
And then Kyle came after Deja. I thought to myself, he is going to be a ladies' man when he gets older. And after Kyle was Olivia, and Olivia had this real long, beautiful curly hair and, hazel green eyes. And then baby Cameron, he was only around 1. When he would see me or our other brothers, he would be kind of confused because we all kind of look alike.
The entire brood is taken care of by their electrician turned stay-at-home dad. Works as a dialysis technician.
Angela was not giving up her job. That's all it boiled down to. So they made a choice. Dennis would watch the children. Angela would go to work.
Angela and Dennis are fun-loving and social parents who pride themselves on instilling good values in their children.
Honey, I'm just gonna put mine in my room for now, okay?
Okay. Anybody else who would describe my mom would tell you that she would give the shirt off her back to somebody. Which she would. She was a good-hearted person.
My brother Dennis was very concerned about what his neighbors thought about him. And we were raised like that, Anytime you're out in public, you're representing yourself and your family.
The Lord says that if you're a good person, that life will treat you well.
One Sunday after church, the new neighbors encounter the Fords.
Oh, don't let us interrupt you.
No worries. I'm Dennis. This is my wife, Angela. Hey, man. This is my brother, Durant.
Sorry, I had the help with the service at Shelton Temple. Are you Pentecostal?
Dennis and I, we were raised in church, and church is a part of our just being in general.
You?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Small world.
Stanley grew up in the church just like Dennis did.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Thanks.
All right.
Stanley and Stanley, they're both fathers. They both love their children and would do anything for their kids.
Stanley would have seen a lot of himself in Dennis, and that's anybody. You have to get to know your neighbors.
They seem nice. We should have them over.
Maybe.
It could be. Kindred spirits will now share the street.
You!
But that's not all they'll share.
Beat it, both of you.
Hey! In a flame of fire.
Leave us alone!
I give vengeance.
One night, while Stanley is doing his usual patrol, his high hopes for his new neighbors are shattered.
Dennis Huggins was known to have sold some marijuana, and that wouldn't have sat well with Stanley Ford, who didn't approve of drinking or, smoking weed or anything like that.
Are you selling drugs?
No. That guy's a friend of mine. For real.
It was only enough, really, I'm telling you, to smoke for free. That was about all it was selling.
But any amount is too much for Stanley.
Guys like you aren't welcome on this street.
To Dennis, Stanley was no threat. I believe Dennis told him what it was, and that was that. Maybe even laughed at him.
Dude, mind your own business.
And lit.
This street is my business.
You're a crazy old fool.
When you hear Stanley Ford say that God told me I'm the angel of this neighborhood, I think that's just a precursor for him saying, if there's anything bad in this neighborhood, I have approval from God to destroy it.
Even though months have passed, Stanley is still fuming from the invasion of Lindell Lewis's friends, and he refuses to lose control of his street again. He has his eye on Dennis Huggins' oldest boy, Jared.
If Stanley Ford ever seen Jared, instantly, from a distance, he would think up to no good. You know, because that's how he has to think. If he sees Jared, he thinks bad. I mean, that's just an automatic to him. Hey!
There were multiple reports made in the neighborhood. Multiple cars had been damaged or broken into. Mr. Ford thought that Jared was responsible for damage to cars.
Hey! I saw you.
He had said to Jared, basically, I know what you did.
And that's the exact wrong way to come to somebody like Dennis.
Don't mess with my son, old man.
You're not gonna tell me this is your neighborhood when I pay for this house.
Now Stanley monitors both father and son.
Dennis thought what you don't have the right to do is to tell other people how they're gonna live. You don't have the right to be the judge, jury, and executioner of those issues. That's what the police are there for.
But Stanley sees himself as the law. One night, he's convinced he catches Jared and Devontae Sams breaking into a car.
Hey!
And jumps into action.
Stop!
Mr. Ford claimed to observe both young men conducting some kind of suspicious activity.
He thought that they were up to no good. I think Jared's breaking out car windows. Oh my gosh, they're now together. What havoc can they wreak on this neighborhood?
When Stanley chases Devontae home, he realizes his family lives next door to his friend, Bev Ewing.
Beverly was one of the neighbors who had her car vandalized, and so this was concerning to Beverly.
Stanley is certain it's not a coincidence. It's those thieving teens. But Jared tells his mother a different story.
I was only looking inside the cars. I don't break into them.
Well, then who is?
You know, Angela just can't believe that Jared was busting windows out. You know, their children represent this house, you represent this family. You're not getting away with knocking people's windows out. It's not happening.
Is Jared in trouble?
No, darling. It's bedtime. Say your prayers.
Stanley's accusations aren't the only thing disturbing Angela. The investigation into the Lindell Lewis house fire has closed without an arrest, leaving the neighborhood afraid there's an arsonist on the loose.
You try to come up with something in your mind to understand the reasoning behind what happened, but you can't. And it just seems unreal that somebody would take it that far.
Angela is terrified of fire because of her ex, Patrick Boggs, whom she is still technically married to.
My dad did a lot of mean things to her. Threw her in the bathtub with kerosene. Tried to light her on fire.
Patrick Boggs spent 12 years in prison for domestic violence and was recently released on parole.
I'm sure Angela had a healthy fear of Patrick Boggs, and rightfully so.
Each day, Angela's fear grows as rumors spread about who the arsonist might be.
I know who broke into your car.
Meanwhile, Stanley is determined to catch the young criminals.
That punk next door.
And corrals Bev Ewing to join him in confronting Devontae's father, Anthony Sams.
Mind if we talk to your kid?
You the dude who followed him?
It's about my car window. I was wondering
What do you want from us, huh?
And Anthony didn't really take it well. He might have been slightly intoxicated and was yelling and putting his arms up.
Do not mess with me. Now beat it. Both of you. Go.
And she felt frightened, which
beat it.
Most people probably would if you have someone belligerently yelling at you.
Be careful. The guy's got a record for assault and selling drugs.
Chester Williams tried to convince his neighbors to back down.
I'm done with them.
Drop it, please. I don't want any trouble.
You don't have to worry.
Stanley wants to protect his neighbors because he thinks that's his job.
To them who know not God.
He thinks God sent him here.
And who not flame of fire. I give vengeance.
This is a neighborhood that you should feel safe because there's families here, there's older people here. It shouldn't feel like a place where I can't send my child outside.
But sending his kids outside is exactly what Stanley is afraid of, especially after attending church. Stanley's family and Dennis's family celebrate differently.
Stanley didn't let people come to his house, which is the exact opposite of somebody like Dennis.
Stanley Ford kept his family intact and quiet, and the Boggs and Huggins family, they like to socialize.
Stanley would see different people coming in and out of Dennis's house. We have nephews, a lot of younger guys, like in their 20s. And I know every Sunday we would all meet up at Dennis's house, you know, music playing, barbecuing, eat all you want, you know, enjoy yourself. And I can imagine somebody like Stanley seeing this. And you can perceive things from a very bad way if you think to yourself, oh, they're not gonna mess up my neighborhood.
Who's your friend, Mr. Weirdo?
They would be kind of scratching their heads like, you know, why is this guy staring? And why doesn't he mind his own business kind of thing?
It's so weird.
For Stanley, the Huggins Boggs are no better than Lindell Lewis's friends.
Been a while. You want to come party in the van, Stan?
Where before his attention was directed across the street at Lindell's, now his focus is on the Huggins and Boggs family.
All right, y'all, let me see.
You know, so he would perceive things that just weren't true. Are they selling drugs? What are they doing over there? And I think he just had a misconception.
Get away from her! Don't
house. The flames are too hot. Seven of the 8 members of the Huggins-Boggs family perish from smoke inhalation. Brittany Boggs is out of town working when she gets the call that will change the rest of her life.
I just dropped down to my knees and started screaming. All I kept saying is, no, 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 like they can't be. I just talked to them. And I was just hoping that somebody was playing a sick joke on me.
When firefighters finally enter the house,
it was very apparent in the positions of these bodies that Dennis Huggins and Angela Boggs, in their final moments, had tried to protect their children.
And I'm like looking at the fire on the news, not even noticing that it was Fultz Avenue and that was Dennis's street. And then come to find out that that was our brother's home that was on fire. And everyone had perished. It was really messed up. You know what I mean? It was really messed up.
I have never in my life felt so defeated. There's nothing you can do. Just sit up there and watch as they bring all these lifeless bodies out. And they bring the kids out. Knowing that the body bags were so little. It was so little. The youngest baby was only 1.
this is the deadliest fire in Akron, Ohio's history. Investigators immediately seek out suspects, beginning with Brittany's biological father, Patrick Boggs.
We learned that Patrick Boggs had done prison time for attempting to set Angela Boggs on fire. That immediately drew a red flag of, maybe he could have done this too.
Police catch him on a parole violation and place him in Portage County Jail. While incarcerated, Patrick confesses the unthinkable to a cellmate. He started the blaze.
There were allegations of him not liking the relationship, not liking her new spouse, Dennis Huggins.
Patrick claims he placed the hot coals from the barbecue at Angela's party into a garbage can by the house.
He had that much dislike for Angela Boggs and their situation that he wanted to try to take credit for it. Search warrants were initiated and conducted on his residence, his vehicle, We were able to determine that charcoal was not how the fire was set. State fire marshals identified accelerants were actually used, whereas charcoal has a different burning pattern and it actually ignites in a different manner.
Someone set the house on fire by using accelerant to spray on the house. So he could not have been the one who actually set the fire at the Huggins-Boggs house.
Police work day and night to find the person responsible for this massacre.
It's beyond me to even fathom something like that. Why would an individual commit such a heinous crime?
It wasn't a simple house fire. This was a fire that was intentionally set to trap them, to not be able to get out. How is that possible? You know what I'm saying? There's got to be something else to it if they all passed away.